This panel, we're going to talk about some exceptional founders. We think that every successful company has three things in common when it comes to their founders. One, they're attractors, right? So that means that talent is attracted to them, so they can recruit. Capital is attracted to them, so they can raise capital. And they're good at sales, so they can actually sell the product, right? We also think that they're good at taking an idea and turning it into a thing, right? So product management. And then there's some technical talent associated with them as well. And I think these three guys here kind of embody that. I'm going to go down the line and kind of give you prompts to introduce yourself. Andy, I'll start with you. You did some amazing things, built a few businesses within Harvard Medical, and then you stepped out and you built Firefly Health, right? Just give folks a little bit about your background, and then we'll move to the next person.
Thanks, Marlon. It's great to be here. So I'm a doctor by background, primary care doctor, but I've always been really focused on essentially how do you rethink how doctors work, how healthcare is organized, how healthcare systems are organized so that we can get access to good care for everyone in the world. So I spent about a decade on the faculty at Harvard. I was actually in global health, so I did a lot of work outside the US in some of the poorest parts of the world. And then I built a center focused on rethinking primary care. Realized 5 years into that I wanted to go faster and do something much more radical, and that required leaving and building a company. So that's when I got to know Marlon. My last company, Firefly Health, is a virtual first advanced primary care model that we eventually built a health plan around, like a virtual Kaiser. And then the new company, Quilt Health, is focused on helping the incredible new therapies that are coming out for complex medical conditions much more efficiently get through clinical trials and to patients.
All right, John, you've been in and around social media and just entertainment for a long time. You stepped away from working for others, and you built a phenomenal company, Jukin, that you raised very little capital for and returned a ton of capital to your investors. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, definitely much more come from a content media background. Started my career producing non-scripted reality shows in the early 2000s, and I was kind of at the right place at the right time where online video was first starting to hit the market, and really just an early adopter to user-generated content, leveraging some video platforms where my bosses told me don't pay attention to. But luckily, being at the right person, the right age, I was an early adopter of this website and platform called YouTube that was posting a lot of user-generated content. And I took advantage of that by buying the underlying IP of a lot of UGC and viral videos at a time where people didn't value it or undervalued it. And quit my job after I was working for Discovery, producing a handful of these clip shows, realized there's value in this kind of content. And so 12 years later, I built Jukin Media through that journey, 300 employees, raised very little capital. The capital we raised, we never touched, sat on the balance sheet, had some really great strategics, Disney, Samsung, Bertelsmann. But yeah, it was kind of part of that first wave of the creator economy and really building a business around content. I think people just kind of discard it, and I love kind of going where no one else is looking and capitalizing and monetizing that.
Awesome. And then Alex, so you're a more traditional tech person. Alex has been at major brands, right, in the tech universe. I think at some point you were you built and owned Square.com, Stripe, as well as played a big part in Cash App, right?
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't always that way, though. I started out as a designer and an engineer freelancing back home in the UK, and I found my way into fintech about 10 or 15 years ago, and by then I'd sort of got tired of explaining to people that I like design as well as being able to write code, and I found myself trying to carve out what at the time was a bit more of a niche at these companies, saying, actually, there's one job. You can call it design technologist. You can have engineers that also understand the user experience, and you can also have people that understand users but know how to write code that powers the products that they use. That was mostly the passion, but I found myself in fintech, partly because I was thinking, wow, I'm kind of bad at money, but I know how to code, and I'm pretty sure there are ways to improve my relationship with money through code and through user experience. And so that's how I ended up at Square. So you're right, I kind of built up a team that ran the public face of Square and a lot of the sales and marketing engineering there, and then basically did the same thing at Stripe for about 3 years. Myself and my co-founder Lindsay owned Stripe.com and all of the design and the engineering that was made up of.
Awesome. Well, I'll have you hold the mic. And this same question, we'll just go down the line. But what was the aha moment that you had that said, I need to break away from my comfortable life at these big companies, this big medical institution, just living life after selling a company for 9 figures, and I need to go and build this other thing?
So my aha moment was kind of 15 years in the making, really. For a long time, I kept thinking, I really want something that will save me from myself. I would very often be living paycheck to paycheck and actually spending more on my credit card than I should have been, and finding that sometimes I would be buying a round of drinks for my friends and the card was bouncing. That was back in the day. And then suddenly I found myself working at these bigger companies surrounded by other people for whom finance was quite interesting, but from a coding perspective. And I looked around and I was like, shit, all of us have the same problem, actually. Like, all of us are bad with money to a certain extent, and we all kind of wish that there was some system that would be like, yeah, don't spend that. Or I knew you were going to spend that, so I sort of moved some money just in advance for you. And the more I sort of peered behind the curtain at these 2 big companies building solutions ostensibly to improve the financial health of people, I kind of realized most of the work was going towards either businesses, which is great, or high net worth people, and it felt like they were getting plenty of help already. And I just thought, like, I'm not seeing any body of work here that's really focusing on the people that probably need the most help, the ones that are incapable of having the time to understand the 4 different credit cards that they have, or figuring out that they have got a balance on a credit card, but they've also got money in a savings account. And like, what does that mean? Does that cancel each other out at all? And so when I looked around me and thought, like, if all of us lot can make these mistakes, for sure there's a ton of people out there as well that need help. And so that's when I thought, I need to go start something and fix it.
John?
So talking about my first company, Jukin again, really thinking about, I started this world in entertainment media when it was very analog, and then I was at the right place for the shift to digital. There was a proliferation of these things, of these really smart devices, and I realized it was easier to create content and consume content than ever before, and that there's going to be value in people creating content, and I'm the guy who knows how to monetize that content and build technology to help find this content and distribute that content better than anyone else on the planet. So I think being a founder and starting a company, it eats at you every single day. Like, if I don't do this, somebody else is going to do that. If somebody else is going to do it, then I won't be able to live with myself. And so I think that was that aha moment. But for me, that I knew how to do this better than anyone. And if someone's going to do it, you just have to do it. And that's when I quit my job and literally started that company from my apartment before I sold.
Andy?
Yeah. So for me, this is a bad healthcare joke that I don't think people will laugh at in this room. But there's a 4-letter word in healthcare. It's called Epic, and that's the big electronic health record that the majority of hospitals at this point use. And so I had practiced for between my training and professional work for about 15 years at one of the big Harvard hospitals in Boston. So-called one of the best hospitals in the world. And I had become really convinced that what was most broken in healthcare and in need of fixing was how doctors and other people delivering the service spend their time. Basically, their workflows, how they interact with patients, the way that care is organized. And essentially, I was working in a place that had committed to spending billions of dollars to implement a software system that baked into it all of these broken workflows, basically. So that was the moment where I was just like, I'm out. I'm on the Titanic right now. I gotta jump off.
I'm gonna. I'll stay with you, Andy. Talking about insider knowledge, right? So being so close to the problem, right? Do you find that's an actual plus, or is it a hindrance as you're building anew?
Yeah, I found it to be a superpower in my world in digital health. Again, I think that while AI and other software intelligence have a huge role to play in making healthcare much more efficient and scalable, the like fundamental problem is actually the work. It's like how doctors work, how they interact with patients, how patients interact with doctors. And I've just found that people who haven't lived that context for a long time, they just they don't understand what the solutions are like, and they can't empathize with the people who are going to need to use their products in order for a disruptive change to happen.
John, so new company, Lost In, right? Focusing on travel, and it's a very disparate group, right? Content is all over the place, and they're not gathered together. Talk a little bit about how you're dealing with that fragmented economy.
Yeah, so wanted to kind of take what I learned from my last company and apply it to the travel space. And what I really realized about the travel space, it is so fragmented itself, but particularly in travel media, it's been run by these legacy publishers that are all dying. And I unfortunately put the Condé Nast, the Travel and Leisures, the Travel Channel in that category. And when I went out to kind of think about what I want to do next, I realized that travel spending was through the roof. People are spending more on travel than ever before, but travel media is heading in the opposite direction. So I was just so obsessed with trying to think about, like, what is the disconnect here? And what I came to the conclusion is that they're not coming at it from a digital first mentality. And that's the experience that I have. They're not building audience. They're not building these communities that have infinity. And a lot of these guys, they came at it from a glossy magazine sit-back style approach. And so you have to lean forward in this very active, multi-platform, multi-agnostic world, that you have to go where the eyeballs are. And that's what I realized, that's what we have to do. We want to create a brand that resonates with a younger audience, and we want to be where those eyeballs are. So at the end of the day, we're just telling stories, but telling it through, leveraging the platforms that are out there.
Got it. At Mac, we've had some pretty good success in the fintech arena, but fintechs are hard to build, and it's a hard industry to crack. Are there some assumptions that you've had to kind of leave behind from your other posts to really go after and build this company?
Yeah, there's a lot. So in case I didn't mention it earlier, we're essentially trying to build a financial assistant using AI. So we want you to be able to delegate most of your thinking about money to us, even if you've got existing accounts. And there's a lot of things that I can bring from those other companies to understand the landscape. We can think through, for example, which compliance hurdles are real versus which are just like perception. But actually, sometimes there have been times when we've realized, actually, we do need to remember some of the lessons that we've learned from those companies. We, at first, for example, thought, maybe we don't need to talk to users in the first couple of iterations, because we've come to this with great taste, hopefully. We've come to this with great experience. We know what people need. Let's just build it. But turns out, it's absolutely true. Always be talking to users. And so realizing, having a bit more humility, I think, actually, about what we're building has helped a lot. And I think we've changed gears since we started doing that.
All right. Let's switch gears to fundraising. I mean, I think each of you had a fairly easy path to raising capital. But did you find that coming out of these kind of legacy industries was helpful as you were raising capital for your new companies, or were investors looking at you like, well, what do you know about building something new? You've been embedded in these big systems for forever.
I can start. I actually, it's a lot easier the second time around with Quilt. But when I started Firefly, I'd spent a decade on the faculty at Harvard, and I had this thing though where like I failed more, in 1 year from the age of 40 to 41 than I had the first 40 years. And, I think fundamentally it's such a different language and different culture in the venture-backed startup world. And, the things that give you credibility in the world that came from are in some ways seen as points against you in the venture-backed world. So there was a lot of just learning by getting things wrong.
I guess I'll say, because I also do some investing. I'm a LP in a handful of funds. And for me, I'm always kind of looking for that pattern recognition. And what I really have found, and what I think an expert in myself is, and everyone on this panel, is really kind of having that domain expertise and having that experience. And I think leveraging that experience, leveraging that domain expertise, creates this kind of network effect.
Yeah, I think I focused a lot on authenticity over authority because, I've spent a lot of time at these fintechs, but a portion of that was on B2C at Cash App, and a lot of it was B2B. And so I did get, honest and fair questions like, do you know this customer inside out? And I think the way that I had the most compelling conversations with folks such as yourself, Marlon, was by saying, well, I certainly am making the same mistakes as the user. And I'm not saying that I personally am going to be the one saying, hey, user A, you should do this with your money. But I do know how to build the system that can arrive at those conclusions for you. And so that's what I focused on.
All right. Last question. I've got 42 seconds, so you guys got to go quick. We're going to go backwards to go forward, right? So what are some legacy systems or beliefs that you believe will be obsolete in your industry in the next 5 years?
In healthcare, it's moving from designing systems and products around the doctor or the person providing the service to designing it around the people receiving the service, patients, people with specific conditions, people in certain episodes in their healthcare journey.
I think there's a lot of money being thrown into my world in the creator economy, but unfortunately, I think AI and AI profiles is really going to decimate creators and content creators out there. And how do you solve that? Well, I think having one-on-one conversations, real life, in-kind events, IRL is going to help solve that. So.
I think in personal finance, the future that we're trying to bring to the present is this notion that you should no longer have to spend much time thinking about your money, basically. You shouldn't have to think, is there this thing I'm missing out on? Is there this mistake I've made, and can I fix it? You should probably, in the next 5 years, just stop all of that and just assume that it's being taken care of for you.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank each of you for allowing us to invest with you and for being our keynotes for this conference today. Please.
Thanks, everyone.